I've been getting a lot of the emails, even some calls from you on the total amount the federal and provincial governments have expended on EV, net zero, battery making, auto manufacturing fantasies that have been engaged in major degree by the provinces of Ontario, Quebec, and BC. I suspect there may be others, but they're not as significant, certainly in terms of that component. But it looks like we're well over $50 billion in commitments, of which the federal and provincial governments have had to pony up not only some upfront money in order for them to meet those conditions of so many vehicles built, but also the infrastructure. Remember here in Ontario, places like St. Thomas where VW made a big announcement a couple of years ago. It was a big splash. Ontario said, yeah, we'll give some money, but don't worry about the money because we actually have to put it in the infrastructure, including electricity. Now, in case of Stellantis, they now plant in LG plant, in Windsor. The electricity is going to have to come from other taxpayers. So ratepayers in Windsor are going to have to pay for this, assuming it goes ahead. It looks like it's not. As for VW, ground is being pulled back, and we're supposed to get the electricity through something called small mid-size reactors or modular reactors. Well, they don't exist. I mean, they're still in the prototype stage, but it doesn't exist yet. So the question is, where's the power going to come from? It obviously has to come from the grid, and someone's going to have to install that. The commitment is the provincial government's going to have to pony up the money. But here, of course, I'm only dealing with a specific aspect of the electric fantasies, the EV fantasies that have been engaged in for the past almost decade now. We know that companies, and I've discussed it in our previous commentary here about Lion Battery, Northvolt, and others that have simply gone bankrupt. These were not very stable or very worthwhile investments. But when you can throw around public dollars, there's no accountability, except that this generation, the next generation, and the one after it will likely have to pay for the things that will never come to be. In the meantime, we have half-built plants, land that's been pulled back, and very little in the way to show for this investment, the so-called public investment. And now, of course, the world is walking away from electric vehicles and EV mandates, except for some people like to trot out what's happening in Norway. Well, I got to tell you, Norway has problems. They don't have electricity during the winter to power all their EVs at night. And last time I checked, Norway has a couple $1 trillion. I don't see pipeline blockers going out there in the middle of the North Sea blocking their pipelines, but I digress. It's not a very smart way to conduct public policy when not only are these things going bankrupt, but in the United States, they no longer have an EV mandate. And then you're saying Canadians should have an EV mandate, which I'd like to talk to a little bit down the road. But you're basically saddling people on something they don't want, can't afford, and is utterly useless for the Canadian weather. I know people think it's cool and trendy to have these things, but hey, take your smartphone out, leave it out in the middle of February in Alberta or even Northern Ontario, and see how long the battery lasts. Oh yeah, you can talk about new solid state batteries or salt batteries, whatever the case may be. The reality is that these things cannot displace the efficiency, the constant innovation of the internal combustion engine. I know we don't like the concept, but the reality is that it works. And it works in a way that I think responds to the needs of most societies. Now, at the end of all of this, is the denial of oil and gas sector. We got news this week that Canada's economy had a slight blip in growth. Guess what? It's because we sold a little bit more oil and gas. It's not because we sell more AI or because we sold more hydrogen. Look, I think Canadians need to get real. Net zero is a false construct created by folks who are trying to profit from carbon credits by basically taxing thin air and making money out of thin air or doing nothing, or sitting on our hands, which I think a lot of Canadians think is cool, but someone has to pay for these things. And so far, it's come in the form of higher energy costs, a weak Canadian dollar, which is adding to the price of pretty much everything. It's come in terms of a stultified growth outlook for this country. And when you increase the amount of migration into Canada, you not only miss your climate targets, you can't get enough people shoehorned into those vehicles. And so when we spend billions of dollars of borrowed money to subsidize something that isn't going to be needed, that the market doesn't want, which people can't decide, to me, I think the federal and provincial governments have to wear egg on their face and be accountable for the bad choices they've made that have threatened and jeopardized the finances of this country. Don't take my word. Wait till November 4th and you see how much of a deficit we've incurred in this country. And that as the interim PBO officer, I think his last name is Jason Jacques, had pointed out, the trajectory of the spending on frivolities like this are unsustainable. And so I ask people now now, take the time to talk to your member of parliament, demand that we get back on track, that we protect the integrity of consumers, affordability, and above all, to make sure that our auto sector is viable to fight for another day using internal combustion engines and the innovations that come with it.